Welcome to the Greatness Is Not Need Approval podcast, where I'm your host, James Epps Jr. And boy, do I have an exciting treat for you today. And this one, I'm telling you guys, this really means something to me. My guy, Felix Quinones. But as always, before we talk to him and get into his impactful interview, I have a question for you, the audience. Do you know how great you are? Because you are great. So no matter if people doubt you, no matter if they don't believe in your dreams and your goals, no matter if they can't see your vision, always remember this: your greatness does not need anybody else's approval. Speaking of greatness, my guy, my friend, Felix Quinones. Do you mind introducing yourself to the people?
Yeah. How y'all doing? My name is Felix Quinones. I'm a photographer and videographer based out of the Dallas area. Was a prior Marine. Worked with the man himself for a little while, and and we're here now.
Well, I'm excited to have him, man, because I saw that he had got out of the military, but his journey did not stop there. He started doing some great things in his life, and that was one of the things that I wanted to bring him on for. But as always, with all our guests, we need to know where it all started. All right, so if you don't mind, just giving us a little bit of your background, where you grew up and where you're from.
Yeah, so kind of all over the place. Because people always ask, like, hey, where are you from? And I'm like, man, that's a loaded question. So my dad was in the Army, and so I was an Army brat. I was born in Germany, on a military base there in Germany, moved around a ton, bounced around from like California, Arizona, a bunch of places. He ended up retiring in Virginia out of a base called Fort Lee. And so just outside of there is where we grew up in a town called Colonial Heights. So if there are any Marines that are food service Marines, they're familiar with Fort Lee, the base, because that's where all food service guys go to school. So I grew up there. It was a super small town at the time. Very little population. It's 3 miles wide, 3 miles long. And it was interesting because that was the first time. So like growing up on military bases, there's a huge mix of culture, right? So you have all different nationalities, you have all different cultures, food, everything. So you're just a blend of people. And then when I moved to Colonial Heights, there was no blend. We were one of few non-white people in that community, and it was definitely a growing phase for that community. We dealt with a lot of diversity or adversity, dealt with a lot of racism growing up initially, but over time it got better. But as a child, I remember not even knowing that people were being racist inherently towards me because I'd never been exposed to it. I had to tell my mom. And I was like, Mom, this is what he said. My mom spazzed out. And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, why is that bad? And then she was like, this is why. And I was like, I don't even understand why. She had to explain the concept to me because I had never been exposed to it. And then, yeah. So I dealt with that for a little while.
How old were you, like, when your dad got out?
So he retired. I think by the time he retired, I might have been like 11 or 12.
Okay, so you were at the age where you were still young, but you were starting to kind of understand stuff. So how did it affect you, like, just moving around so much? Did you, like, not want to move? Because I have military kids, and I know it's had an effect on them, like the moves and stuff like that, because they make friends and then they have to move. How was the effect on you, like, when you like, man, I don't want to move. I just got used to here. How was that?
Truthfully, for me, it didn't bother me because I was still too young to really understand or know what was going on. Excuse me. There was one move. My mom decided to move to Florida when I was in 10th grade. That one was tough. That was like a full-blown, like, teenage kid not wanting to do it because I had friends and all that other stuff. My brothers, they suffered on the front end of my dad's military moves. But for me, I didn't think anything of it. I literally did not. I was just like, all right, we're moving again. And then that was it.
Because this is like easy. Let's just go make more friends. We just got more friends.
Yeah, I was a kid. Elementary school. By the time he got out and retired, because his last duty station was in Virginia, and then he retired. So by the time we moved there and then he retired, I was already in middle school, but I had started in elementary school. So it was really, I moved around first, second, third, fourth grade, and that was it. And by fifth grade, I was in the same place.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so.
And you said, like, then your mother made a move and you moved. Mm-hmm. So did you end up going with her to Florida?
Yeah, as much as I did not want to, yeah. I went kicking and screaming, man. I did not want to do that one.
Why was that such a tough move? Because we ended up moving my daughter in the 10th grade. So I'll be interested to hear another perspective on that. Why was that such a tough move? So other military families can understand it.
So I think the biggest part about it is like, and I know I still kind of deal with this now as an adult, but when you move into a town where kids are so close knit and like, so they've been friends since kindergarten, they've been friends since, their parents went to school together. You're always kind of the kid on the outside. And so as you grow up with them and they start to welcome you in, like it took time to make those friends, because being the guy or the person on the outside, you're never really those kids' priority when there's like sleepovers or fun things, unless you have to build that relationship. So by the time I got to 10th grade, I finally had like a group of friends. I had a community, like there were people there that like knew us, like we knew each other personally. And so then to move somewhere completely different was, I just wasn't prepared for that. And not like it was so vastly different. I mean, you're talking about like a small suburban town to Miami, Florida. Like it wasn't like it wasn't like another small suburban town. Like this is Miami, Florida, in like a predominantly Hispanic populated community. I mean, I'm Puerto Rican. My Spanish is not that great, so I was like, man, you couldn't. For example, my high school graduating class was 1,200 people. Like
that's something school.
But the entire school. When I was a senior, the entire school was 1,200 people. The school I went to in Miami was 6,000 kids. Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah, it was culture shock completely. So I only lasted a year. I ended up moving back with my dad.
Oh, okay. All right. So you said your mom and your dad, like, did they end up like splitting?
Yeah. So they got a divorce they separated when I was 8. And then they finally got a divorce. I mean, they were separated for a long time, so I don't know. They think I was like in middle school going into high school, and they finally got a divorce.
Do you want to talk about it? Like, I
don't mind at all.
What was that effect on you? Like, because that seemed like that would be pretty hard for a kid your age. Like
it's gonna sound real bad. I didn't care. Yeah, no. And so I mean, in the sense of like. Yeah, so I mean, in the sense of like my parents had a rough relationship in general, and me and my brothers were like, this doesn't make sense. And so for like kids to be like, y'all should probably not be together. That's kind of where we were at. So when it happened, we were like, this is for the best. Like we were more so like, we've been trying to tell y'all.
And you knew that at that age?
Yeah, a lot of arguing, a lot of fighting, it was very toxic. Like it was a very like toxic relationship.
And so you already we good.
It was just like, it made no sense. And so it was just like, what's the point of being with someone if you're just going to argue all the time?
Okay. All right, so was there anything else you struggled with growing up with all the different dynamics that you were dealing with?
A ton of stuff. So like, I still struggle with like imposter syndrome now. So like where I grew up, it was and so like, that's the beauty of parents, right? Or like being an adult now is like, oftentimes you don't know what your parents are doing for you until you're an adult, and then you see it or you have to do it for your kids and you're like, dang, my parents really did. So like where we grew up, granted it was rough, right? So I dealt with bullying, I dealt with racism, but it was an up and coming suburban neighborhood based around like a ton of entrepreneurs. So almost all my friends' parents were business owners. And so for me, growing up on like food stamps and like WIC and all that stuff, my mom, we were barely getting by, but she could afford the rent so I could go to a good school, essentially is what happened. And in that, I was exposed to a bunch of like very wealthy people. And I got to do cool stuff as a kid, but I always felt like just the poor kid. Like, you know what I mean? So you're always dealing with that as like, oh, I'm just the poor kid that hangs out with rich kids. You know what I mean? And so like, even now as a business owner, like if I haven't hit certain markers and I'm talking to other business owners, it does bring that emotion back sometimes, and I have to remind myself like, no, I earned this. Like I deserve to be in these rooms. I did these things, but like there's definitely like some self-work you have to go through when you have that stigma of like, yo, because I used to always say like, I'm just a poor brown kid, because it was all predominantly white kids. I was like, I'm just a poor brown kid. They just hang out with me. And it's like, I had to get over that idea that like, no, I earned this. Like I deserve to be in this room.
So what would you tell like a kid who maybe dealt with like the same or is dealing with a situation similar to yours? Like if you could give yourself advice for what you were going through, kind of experiencing, what would you tell a kid?
Don't accept what people tell you. I think that's the biggest thing. So like, don't accept the stigmas or the titles that they give you. So growing up for me, I had ADHD and dyslexia, and I didn't know I had dyslexia for a while. Then I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until I was 13. So in school, again, this is a fully accredited school, 7-point grading scale. So like, these kids are smart. They're getting good grades. The pace is high. And so in school at that time, there wasn't a lot of like programs for learning disabilities or anything like that. And I joke around and I say all the time, you were either smart or you were dumb. That was it in their eyes. And so I gave into that. I gave into like, I'm just the dumb kid. So then you couple that with like, I'm just the dumb, poor brown kid. And so then now you're just like, well, in order to be accepted, I either have to accept this role or just be funny, you know? And so I didn't take a lot of things seriously. I bought into being stupid. I bought into being, you know, the outsider, all this stuff. And that, you diminish your light and you diminish the gifts that you have when you do stuff like that. And so then when you start to see presence of it or like glimpses of it, you have to really start to believe, and growing your own self-belief takes a long time. And so I always would say to myself, like, don't give in to what people tell you. Those titles, you don't have to accept them. Like if you, in your heart, you feel or believe that you're going to be this thing one day or you can be, then that's all that matters. Like I tell my daughters all the time, the most important thing that matters is what you say to yourself, not what anybody else says anything to you.
I just posted something about that this week. Like I had a post and that's what it was about. As like what you tell yourself is what really matters. Don't worry about what other people say. Yep. That's what. So that's awesome. That's the advice that you give your daughters. And so now you're gonna, after you going through all this military moves and things like that, you decided to join the military yourself.
Yeah.
So how did that come about?
Yeah. So again, I bought into what people called me and what people told me, right? So I'm not smart. I can't learn. And so I just became like a clown and I started making really bad decisions. And, you know, you start dabbling with bad things at times and ages where you shouldn't be doing them and making bad choices. And I could tell that like no one really expected a lot from me. And I know that sounds bad and I don't mean that in a negative way, but even my dad, like I joke around with him all the time. I'm like, probably didn't expect this. And so like, I was not going the right direction. And, a buddy of mine, a few of my friends had already joined the military. My dad had told me my whole life, do not join the military. He wanted me to go to college, wanted me to get a job, do that whole thing. And so I went to community college, dropped out after my first year. And then, you know, I was just pretty much a loser. I was making a lot of bad choices, doing a lot of bad stuff. So a buddy of mine, we went to this party. A bunch of my buddies got into this huge fight and we ran because we didn't want to get in trouble. The next morning, I just woke up like tired of it. I woke up tired of making bad decisions. I woke up tired of like these scenarios repeating. And I remember thinking to myself, like, man, I'm going to be a loser for the rest of my life. Like if I don't do something drastic, I'm going to be a loser. And so I had this rosary that hung from the rear view of my car. And I literally had it there because I assumed like as a Hispanic dude, I should have a rosary. I know that sounds crazy, but that was literally the only reason why I had it at the time. And so I'm so serious. I'm going to see my buddy and I hit the stoplight and there's a crosswalk and I grabbed the rosary and I was like, yo, if you're real, just tell me what I'm supposed to do next. I've never asked you for anything. I never talked to you. Like if you're real, tell me what I do next and I'll do whatever that is. Like whatever it is. And I opened my eyes and this man is crossing my car on the crosswalk with a crucifix on his back, going into my buddy's neighborhood in the middle of summer in Virginia. And so I made the right turn and this guy's walking past my buddy's house. I'm so serious. This is such a true story. And so he walks past my buddy's house and my buddy comes out. And I was like, yo, I just came to check on you. Like last night was crazy. Where are you going? And do you want to hang out? And he was like, I'm actually going to see my recruiter. You want to go? And I was like, yes. And so I literally went with him, walked in and was just like, hey, my name's Felix. How soon can I leave? What do I got to do? And I didn't even tell my buddy. My buddy was like, what are you talking about? And so like 2 weeks later, I was in the Marine Corps. That's exactly what happened.
So you went to him. He didn't have to recruit you. No, nothing.
They didn't believe it. When I walked in, they were like, what do you mean? And like the recruiter was like, what do you? And I was like, yo, the soonest, whatever it is. And I was like, and I promised my dad I wouldn't do infantry. What jobs do you have? And then as long as I can get something guaranteed, I'm gone. So yeah, It was like
I
2
know
weeks.
what happened next because I was a recruiter. So the next day they probably started asking you, do you do drugs? Did you fail out of school?
Yeah. But I mean, I took the ASVAB, the little practice ASVAB.
Yeah.
I took that right then and there, and I passed. And that's when they were like, "Oh man!" So they
started getting excited
because I had ran track, so I was fit, I was in shape, so I literally walked. You couldn't have been a better scenario.
Yeah. So once you made that decision,
Yeah.
like, was it one of those things where you made the decision, you got back in the car, and you was like, "What did I just do?" Or was it like, "Nah, I'm full steam ahead"?
Yeah, I knew it was really my only option, so I didn't even think about it. The next conversation I had to have was with my dad. So that was the biggest thing. Well, I kind of didn't tell him. So what happened was I made sure that I was already in a position to where he couldn't change anything before I told him. And mind you, I was already 18, so there was nothing he could have done. But he had my birth certificate, and I couldn't finish the paperwork without the birth certificate. Mm-hmm. And so I waited until I filled everything out, and I was like, "Hey, Pop, I need to pick up my birth certificate." And he was like, "For what?" And I was like, "Oh, I got this meeting thing." And then I finally told him, and he was like, "No, I'm going to go down there." And I was like, "It's already done. Like, I just need the birth certificate."
My question is, why was he, and not to, because your parents do what they can, and sometimes we think we're protecting our kids. So I get it, but why would you think he didn't want you to join the military? What scared him about you joining the military?
Well, because he dealt with a lot of adversity in his career. So my dad joined from Puerto Rico, and he couldn't speak English when he joined. And so his initial intent was to be in the Army band. That's what he was told he was signing up for. And then next thing you know, he's in the infantry. And so it took him 10 years to be able to advocate for himself to lat move into the Army band. My dad's been a trumpet player since he was a kid. He's a phenomenal trumpet player. And so doing infantry, always being gone, in the field, doing all that. And then obviously when you can't speak English or your English is broken, you're not necessarily spoken to the way you would speak to a normal person.
Unfortunately.
And so I think there was just a lot of stuff like that he was just like, I didn't do all that, so you had to do it all. And that's kind of like.
Yeah, that is, I mean, I can understand his frustration because that is two different things, like the infantry and the band. To the people that, people who are in the service, that's like that's way, that's not even close. We're not even in the same ballpark when you talk about those two jobs.
Yeah.
But he ended up giving you the birth certificate. And so now you go to boot camp. All right. So you go to boot camp. And so now what happens after that? So how was your career? How did it start? Like, did you like it? Did you didn't like it? What was going on?
So it started off terrible. So I'll tell you the truth too. This is another situation. I'm telling you, I tell people all the time, somebody is watching over me. Like I have something or someone that is guiding me, and it has my whole life. Because every twist and turn where I could have made a stupid decision, I've been guided in another direction. So I go to boot camp, and I'm like, this ain't that bad. And I know that sounds crazy, and I'm not saying that to sound tough, but my dad being in the military, we were very neat and we were very orderly. Everything was clean. We cleaned on Saturdays, there were a field day on Saturdays. Everything was systematic. So when I went to boot camp, a lot of that stuff was okay, you do what you're told. You clean on specific days. You work out a little, which I did regularly. And I was like, this really isn't, you know what I mean? And my dad always told me before I left, he said, just because they're tired of their hurt doesn't mean you're tired of your hurt. He was like, just remember that. So whatever you see other people feeling and thinking, that doesn't mean you have to feel or think. And so I just ran with that. I was like, I'm in my own little world. This is my life now. It is what it is. And after the first, the first month, it's kind of systematic. It's just okay, this day we do this day we do that. As long as I don't lose my mind, I'm not going to get in trouble. So we're good.
Yeah, I was the same way. I said, it took me about 2-3 weeks, and I was just like,
yeah, it's
all right. My dad, he used to be on me like that anyway, so that didn't bother me.
Yeah.
And then once I realized what they were doing, you figure it out. Like you said, the physical stuff, 3-sport athlete, so you get it.
Yeah. If you play sports and you're active, it's the personality thing. Can you remove your own personality and ego out of it? And if you can do that, then you're good.
Now, we don't want to make it sound like it's just that easy, but it is a mental thing.
That's what it is. No, it's very difficult. Yes, it's very, very difficult.
Get there quicker mentally.
It is.
They're able to get through it.
If you accept what it is that you're about to endure, it's easier.
Like the drill is going to say, the quickest way off is to graduate. So once you accept, like, all right, no matter what I do, the quickest way off is to graduate. Let me just do what they're saying, and we're good. And so now we get through boot camp. And so you chose the MOS. What MOS you chose? Like, so did you
logistics?
So logistics right off, right? So why did you choose logistics? What did you think it would do for you?
So my dad told me not to do anything infantry. So I was like, okay, I can keep that bargain with you. So I won't do infantry. So then the guy, the recruiter was like, hey, what about embarkation logistics? And I was like, I don't know anything about any of that stuff. You know what I mean? Initially I wanted to be intel. I thought that would have been cool. I wanted to be an interrogator. Not that was going to be a possibility, but I was like, yeah, intel interrogator would be crazy. Yeah. So dude was like, what about embarkation logistics? And I was like, what do they do there? And he's like, I think they like push bombs out of airplanes and stuff like that. And I was like, that sounds crazy. Let's do that one. So I was like, that sounds so cool. So yeah, that's literally why I picked it. So I was like, yeah, I'm an embarker. I'm an embark logistics guy.
So you still waiting to push that bomb out?
No, I did some cool stuff. But
you didn't push the bomb out though.
Nah. But I did hook pallets to helicopters, and that was enough.
Yeah. And so you did embark, and that's where we met, and you worked for me, and I'll say I'll tell anybody that was one of the best sergeants that I could have, and he was great for me at the time, and hopefully I was great for him at the time. I ain't gonna let him put that on wax. I ain't gonna let him hold that. No, but I enjoyed working for him. Working with him, he was very easy to work with. But then I started following your career like after that. And so you would go on to be like a martial arts instructor. So how was that? Why did you choose to do that?
So once I decided to actually like buy into the Marine Corps career, so MOS school, I made another bad decision. My career was almost over instantly, like literally in MOS school, like instantly. And my instructors, they were like, hey man, we believe in you. We see potential in you. So we're going to kind of work this a different way. And in that moment, I was like, okay, I almost messed up my opportunity. I'm not going to do this again. So I bought in 100%. I was like, whatever it is I got to do to excel, that's what we're going to do. This is the only chance I'm probably going to get again. And so after MOS school, well, out of MCT, I received an award. I got a meritorious mass in MCT. And then I think I got another meritorious mass in MOS school. So then I was like, okay, we're kind of like, this is kind of like, I get it. So then I go to my first duty station, and it was kind of the same thing. So I get promoted twice in 1 year. I picked up sergeant within 2 years from the day I joined the Marine Corps. It was like, it was happening. And I started to see a lot of like opportunity. I started to believe in myself. I started to think like, okay, I can succeed in something. This is working. Well, my sergeant at the time was a martial arts instructor, and I just liked the way he carried himself. I like the idea of teaching and instructing, but I've always been fascinated with martial arts. So I was like, okay, you get to do two things. You get to teach and you get to do martial arts. This is pretty awesome. And it helps with promotion. So I was like, all of these things make sense to me. So when I signed up when I did the initial course, that was 3 weeks in Fort Worth. And that was rough. It was pretty rough. And honestly, I really contemplated, because my idea was to go to be an instructor trainer. But after the first 3 weeks, I was like, man, I don't know if I want to do 9 weeks. This is pretty bad. Like, I was like, this was pretty rough. So honestly, truthfully, I had removed that goal. I was like, I don't think I want to do it. And so then when I got orders to Virginia before you got there, Gunny Banks called me in Texas, and he said, hey, when you get here, here's the things that you're going to do. And he was like, you're going to go to the instructor trainer course, you're going to go on a deployment, and then you're going to go to sergeant's course, or no, it was something else, because I'd already gone to sergeant's course. And I was like, the instructor trainer course? And he's like, yeah, there's a new Marine Corps order. Everybody in the squadron's got to go, or they have one squadron per. You're the guy because you're going to be there the longest. And so I'd already been dabbling with the idea, but he kind of like pushed you over. Yeah. And so I was like, all right, we're going to do it. So yeah, so I went. It was nine weeks, and that was, until this day, it's the hardest thing I've probably ever done in my life.
So what lessons did you learn from like both of them, like just throughout your career and then just being an instructor? What were the lessons that you learned throughout that time?
So, I mean, throughout my career, I learned that everything I thought about myself prior is not true. I think that's the biggest thing, right? So throughout my career, I learned that I'm capable. I learned that I can learn. That was the biggest thing, is I learned that I can actually learn. I learned my learning styles. I learned how to take notes. I learned how to manage information. And then once I was able to do those things, I was like, man, what else can I learn? And so then I went back to college. I started doing all these things that I always believed I couldn't do. I guess self-belief was the biggest thing I got out of my career. And then just how to solve problems. Like, I don't tend to panic when there's an issue because I know there's a solution. You'll find it, right? So like, anytime something comes up, it's like, all right, let's figure out what our options are. Let's step back for a second, see where we're at, and then figure out how to solve the problem. That's it. Like, there's no, oh my God, this is burning down. It's just, what are our options? Where are we at? Let's solve the problem.
All right. So then you ran into a problem.
Yeah.
All right, so your career is going.
Boy, did I ever.
So your career is going, right? So you're moving. But then all of a sudden, like so it sounds like you were fast tracking. You were on your way to taking my spot as the future face of logistics. That
was the plan.
Right?
Actually,
yeah,
that was
the plan. All right, so Mike Tyson says everybody got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So you got punched in the mouth. So tell us about how when you got punched in the mouth and you get like, you start having bad things happen before you get out of the miracle.
Yeah. So actually, truthfully, where it kind of started to go was in Virginia, like right before I left. So everything up until that point, I was killing it. Like, I was a golden boy. You couldn't touch me. I was doing everything I needed to do, answering all the questions, all that stuff. In Virginia, and I don't know if you remember this or not, because I think you actually had to show up. They either got sick or something on duty. And then you called me and I had to show up to fill in for them on duty. And so when I showed up to fill in for them for the first time in my life, I had a panic attack while on duty.
Yeah, I remember
so then
that.
I had the A duty call the ambulance because I had no idea what was happening. I was like, bro, I don't know what's going on right now. I think I'm dying. And so I ended up going to the hospital that night and they were like, no, man, I think you just had a panic attack. But we were also under a lot of stress because remember, my wife was pregnant at the time and they were trying to move her to Pennsylvania and they wanted me to be a recruiter. You remember that?
Yeah.
And then you came up with the idea of me going to New Orleans and we were like, how do we do that? How do we even swing that? So I think all of that stress, I had a panic attack. So then like, I started to actually have panic attacks frequently from there. And then the move thing got sorted out. We ended up going to New Orleans. And at that time, I just wasn't as sharp and I wasn't the same person because I was dealing with these panic attacks and I was trying not to tell anybody at work that I was dealing with panic attacks because I didn't know what they were. And so I kept going to medical because I was like, all right, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. So I was constantly leaving work to go to medical. Well, because of that, in the Marine Corps, you're constantly going to medical. You're not, you're not mentally sharp. You're not there. You're not, operationally effective. So my boss at the time was just really starting to we just didn't agree on anything. And there was definitely a dislike for me. And then on top of everything I was dealing with, I started to lose the identity that I had built for the first 6 years. And I was questioning my capabilities because I was like, dang, maybe I'm not as sharp as I thought, or maybe I'm not as effective because I was listening to these things that this man was saying about me on a regular basis. And then, so then we moved to California and I was still kind of dealing with it. Also with the stress of building and setting up an entire unit. So you're dealing with, mental health issues. You're dealing with the stress of moving your family. You're building a unit. So I'm at work, 20 hours a day sometimes. And then fast forward I had 2 years left on contract. I decided that I wasn't going to re-enlist. And then I got popped for recruiting again. So they selected me for recruiting again. And I told them, I said, I have zero intention on re-enlisting. I would like to just finish out my contract and then just kind of ride off into the sunset. Well, because of all the things I had accomplished in my career, I was qualified. And so they couldn't not qualify me. So when they selected me to be qualified, and then I denied the orders and I told them, hey, in the meeting, I told you I wasn't going to re-enlist, so I'm not going to do it. They cut my contract date. So instead of having 2 years left, I ended up having 4 months left.
And so with those 4 months left, all right, so how was that and what was the effect on your family when you hear what you mean 4 months, because it takes a lot to prepare to get out of the military.
Yeah.
So what did that feel like?
Being a logistics guy, I'm a planner by nature. I'm always planning options, secondary options, all that stuff. So I had a plan financially and career-wise for 2 years left. and I knew what I was going to do. Initially, I was going to be a real estate agent. So I was actually going to school to get my license in real estate. And I figured once I got my license, then I'd have a year to start trying to sell things, work for a brokerage. By the time I get out, I'd be in like full speed and I'd be good. Well, with those 4 months left now, it changed everything. And my wife's extremely supportive. Like, you've met her. But since day one, man, she supports me in every single thing I do. And so even in times where I was like, what are we going to do, or how are we going to do this? She was always like, we'll figure it out. We always do. Like, we've just got to kind of pivot, and we got to do a couple of things. But the hard part was I never really had like a set date of when I was actually going to be out, because they kept messing up paperwork. There was changes in office staff. People weren't responding to emails. So even all the way up till I had my last like 30 days for people that are in the military or terminal leave, we had no idea when my actual EAS date was. And so applying for jobs, it was almost impossible because I couldn't tell anybody like when they were like, when can you start? And I'm like, I don't know. And so luckily my neighbor, she was a head chef at a casino, and she said, hey, there's a couple positions at the casino. Like, do you want to work there? And I told her straight up, I was like, I don't know anything about like cards and gambling. And she's like, no, they have like a ton of jobs. And so one of the jobs they had open was an instructor's position. And I was like, well, I've done that for the last like 10, 11 years. We'll give that a shot. So I applied. And then when I applied, I only had like 2 weeks left before my 30-day terminal. And then I got the interview, and I was like, holy crap. So then I get the interview, and initially they actually denied me for the job because I wasn't bilingual. And then I guess they had another talk, and she called me back like 2 days later because I was panicking at that point. I was like, I'm about to go on terminal. I had zero options. Like, I don't know what's going on. And so she literally called me 2 days before I went on terminal. She said, hey, after the interview and after your delivery, because you had to give like platform instruction in front of like the GMs and all the directors. And she was like, I think we're going to look past the fact that you can't speak Spanish, and we'd like to hire you. So I literally got the job 2 days before I went on terminal.
And so with everything that was going on in your career, why aren't you like bitter at the Marine Corps?
And you can, right? Like, you could. Mm-hmm. Like, I absolutely could. But the reality of it is like that one stint of 2 years doesn't negate the 10 to 12 years that changed my life. Like, you know what I mean? Like, everything I do now and everything I have is because of the Marine Corps. Some of the people I've met and the experiences, like knowing you and interacting with you and seeing the things that you've done and learning, and all of that is still a massive part of my life. And so it's like, I absolutely could be bitter, especially like if you knew the whole story, 100% could. But then it would be a disservice to all the other good people I met and all the things that like changed my life.
Yeah, I always tell people, man, if I had to take all the bad things out in my life and just get the good, then I wouldn't be who I am today. So
yeah, 100%.
And who you are today is a business owner. Yeah, I can honestly say, man, I am so proud of you. I'm glad you got your hair cut, because that was looking nasty. I mean, I got it, but you went a little crazy. I know people get out and they go a little crazy. You went a little crazy. But hey, so how did we get to this point to now you're a business owner, man, and you're doing great things with photography?
Yeah. So I guess initially you got to go all the way back first, and then we'll come back. So like I said, where I grew up, it was all business owners. Like, all my friends' parents owned businesses. So I used to see the difference between people that had jobs and people that owned businesses. And I would be like fascinated. I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of get this. So in high school, you had to write a letter to your senior self when you were a freshman. And it was like, what do you want your hair to look like? Where do you want to live? What kind of job do you want? And one of the lines was, I just want to work for myself. Like, I want to own my own business. At the time, I wanted to own a skateboard shop because I was a skateboarder. But like, I knew I wanted to own my own business, and I wrote it down. And so I think that idea was always kind of there. And then it wasn't until, and then in the Marine Corps, I tried to open a couple of businesses, and they didn't work out. And so, you know, I had a camera, I picked it up. I was working on a side project. I had a t-shirt company, and I was taking photos of products, and then the t-shirt company went away. The camera stayed. I started making a little bit of money while I was in, just to like buy equipment. So like $50 for family photos and stuff like that. And then $50 turned into $85 turned into $100. But then while I was working at the casino, I found that like every day I went into the casino, the only thing I was thinking about was taking pictures. I was like, man, if I could do this full time, that'd be so great. And I remember telling my wife, like, if there was a way I could figure out how to do this full time, this would be so crazy. Cause like, it's all I think about. And I would like on my lunch break, I'd be editing photos or like watching videos on how to edit photos. And so then, you know, I'd started making okay money on the side with photos. And then when COVID hit, that's when it was like, what do we do? So my wife and I both worked at the same casino at that time. And so when COVID hit, they furloughed everyone. And then they even said after the furlough, some of you may have jobs, some of you may not. And in California, without both jobs, we were not going to make it. Because initially I wanted to stay in like the Temecula, Southern California area. But I mean, without two sources of income, that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, I understand that. And so now you start the photography business. So how do we get there? So how do we get to like, all right, so now this is what we doing?
Yeah. So again, my wife, she comes into play. So one day we were sitting up, it was late. It was, you know, COVID. What are you doing? Nothing. So she said, hey, what about moving to Texas? And I was like, well, we don't even know anybody in Texas. She's like, yeah, but that's where we met. They have great veterans benefits. You know, we already know the area. And then you could do this photo thing full time. And I was like, but I don't have any clients. Like, I don't know anything. And so we did. I was like, you know what? Because I'm a planner. I was like, let me do the math. And so I did the math based on savings and potential income, everything we had. And we had 9 months of savings. So we had enough to cover food expenses, rent, and bills for 9 months. And then I was like, all right, so we give it a shot for 9 months. And then if not, we start applying for jobs. And that covered moving company. It was everything. Like we had enough to cover all the stuff. So I was like, all right, we'll start looking, whatever. And so we started looking. We found a guy that would rent us a house without any proof of income. I probably shouldn't be saying that on this podcast. But he was just like, hey man, as long as you pay the rent, I don't care. And so I was like, all right. So we packed up. Mind you, this is height of COVID. So like we had to even look up, can you cross state lines? Because there was like swirls going around in the news that like they weren't letting you in other states if you were coming from like California or other states. And so I was like, I don't even know if we can like cross state lines, but everything was good. So we literally, in the height of COVID, California to Texas, drove. It took us about a day and a half because we did one stop. And then we got to Texas, we set up, and I just went to work. Anything I could do to get in front of clients, just to market. I took photos of everything: weddings, toddlers, families, dogs, like anything that would pay me money. We just needed to do it until I could, because the first thing I had to do was prove that I could make a consistent income. And then once I did that, then I knew I could step back and build a real business. And then that's what happened, essentially.
So you're telling it's important to have like a good partner in a relationship.
Makes them, yeah.
Yeah, because it sounds like every time you were like struggling, yeah, and just like, all right, what do we do? It's like she had the answer. She was right there for you. And just like, I support you. So to all the people out there who looking for a good partner, if your partner ain't doing this, you might want to keep looking.
No, I mean, it's real. And I've never said this on podcasts or anything. When we started out, my first year in business, I only made $500. The whole year. I only made $500. And here in Texas. So my whole first year in Texas, I made $500. And so, I mean, we did everything. I had a whole sneaker collection. You see these shoes back here? This is all rebuild. I sold every pair of sneakers I had to pay the rent. My wife was giving plasma to pay the rent. Like, we were doing everything we could because we were like, yo, we believe in this and I think this could work. And mind you, I was home with my kids. And when I was in the Marine Corps, I was always gone. I was never around. And so I was like, I need this time to be around. So we did whatever we could. And anytime I didn't want to do something, she'd be like, what else are we doing? Like, literally the only reason why we're here is to do this thing.
So my question to you, would you do it again?
Yeah. Because
of all the sacrifices you had to make to get yourself to where you're going now, would you do it again?
Yeah, 100%.
So what would you say to somebody who's like, well, I have this dream. I think I can do it, or I want to do it. So what would be preventing them from doing it? What would be the thing that you would tell them to like, go ahead and do all the things that you just did to get to where you are?
Fear. That's it. Like you have to overcome the fear, and the fear of being a failure, or the fear. I didn't even tell my parents I didn't have a job. Like, I told my dad I was working for like a whole year. I'm a grown man, but I just didn't know how to tell my dad that I was like, yeah, I'm just trying to do this photography thing. I didn't know how to explain it to him, so. But it's fear, and especially when you have kids, right? So I had 3 kids at the time, and I'm married, and so 4 people depend on every single step I make and every choice I make. But when you have no other option, you just keep going forward, and that's it. Like, the days that suck, or you're tired, or no one's answering, or you're not getting paid, like, you just keep working, because eventually they will pay you. You will see that things happen. But if you look up constantly to see where you're at, then it's going to feel like the worst experience ever. But just put your head down and just keep going, and just know that the path you're on is the one you're supposed to be on.
Man, thank you. Thank you, man. That was some good advice for people. I hope y'all listening. Because, hey, my man Q is dropping some gems on y'all. All right, so with all that being said, man, with everything that you've gone through in your life and everything that's happened, so you did all this, and I'm sure you didn't do it for nothing. So what is the lasting impact or legacy that you want to leave with people to kind of help them out?
So there's a couple of things. There's a few plans. Right now we're in the building phase of going real business, real official. So, I mean, instead of just being a freelance photographer, we're building it out now to where we can I will have editors. I'll have other photographers that work for me, and I'm doing more of the sales, more of that management styled stuff. So we're building that out now. By the end of this year, I'm sure I'll have 2 or 3 people on the staff, and then we're going to get to a point where essentially it's a functioning media company. And then outside of that, I'd like to get into more instruction, more teaching, just sharing, just because there's a lot of things that I've done and been through and dealt with, but I also know that I didn't do any of those things just for me. And so if I can share that with anybody to help them go through it or work through it or build through it, then I'd love to do that. So whether that looks like teaching or speaking or whatever it is, but that's the long-term goal.
Man, that's awesome. Hey, so where can people find you so we can send some, especially the people in Texas? Or do you travel? I don't know. I didn't ask you all that.
I used to, not so much now. It didn't make sense at the time.
All right, so where can people find you and follow you? I'm sorry, I didn't mean that.
No, you're good. You're good.
Where can people find you or follow you? Maybe on IG, Facebook, or whatever.
Yeah. So Facebook's really just for friends and family, but Instagram is @_Qmedia_. So if you hit me up on Instagram there, I'll always respond. I'm super active there. Also, LinkedIn is just Felix Quinones. And those are the 2 main places you could probably get me.
Well, is there anything else you want to leave with people before we say goodbye?
Just believe in yourself. You know what I mean? That's really the biggest thing, is what you say to you is far more important than what anyone else in the world has to say to you. So remember that. And then in that, choose the right things to say, listen to, and read, and become what it is you're supposed to be because you believe you can be.
I'm proud of you.
You're crazy.
The young baby deer has become.
Don't, baby deer.
Nah, my bad. I was trying to use something, but it didn't come as quick as
it was weird. Deer was weird.
I might have to. I know. But thank you for blessing us with your presence on the podcast. And as always, to my audience, remember, you are whatever you say you are. If you believe, therefore you are. And you are great. And your greatness doesn't need anybody else's approval.